Welcome to this episode of 10 Minutes with Sam, and this is Akshat Singh. We recently started observing the centenary celebrations of the birth anniversary of the former Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao. And today, to discuss the life and achievements of former PM P.V. Narasimha Rao, we have with ourselves Commodore Uday Bhaskar. Commodore Bhaskar has had a distinguished career in the Navy, wherein he has served as the officiating director of the IDSA, the director of the National Maritime Foundation, and currently serves as the director of the Society for Policy Studies. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, the format for the show is fairly simple. We have 10 minutes, and in these 10 minutes, we will try to answer 4 questions. So without wasting much time, here's my first question. So we know that former PM P.V. Narasimha Rao had a fairly complicated legacy. What can you tell us about him from your personal experiences?
I think the phrase complicated legacy is very appropriate for Mr. Narasimha Rao. Well, I do not want to overstate this, but it was limited in the sense that I first met Mr. Rao, Narasimha Rao, as the defense minister when I was then a very young officer and in the Ministry of Defense, and I was the PRO for the Navy. In those days, it was the pre-computer era, so whenever the defense minister traveled out of Delhi for a major event, a small press team went with him. And therefore, whenever he went to naval establishments, I used to be on the aircraft with him. And I remember one flight very clearly. We had taken off from Delhi. We went to Pune for an event with the DRDO. And from there, we were supposed to go to Port Blair, spend the night in Port Blair for an event with the Navy, and then come back the following day to Delhi. So it was overnight in Port Blair. We took off from Pune. We reached Port Blair. It was bad weather, but finally we were able to land. And when we got there in the late afternoon, there was news that Mr. Rao was required back in Delhi immediately from the Prime Minister. There was a certain internal security issue that was developing, and this is the reason why he was called back. So we flew back from Port Blair again to New Delhi, and that was one of the longest flights I did. So that was one of the few occasions when I had a slightly extended chat with Mr. Rao in the cabin. And he was a polyglot. He knew many languages, and I was very intrigued by the fact that he had translated certain classics from Telugu into English. So this is something I had read about him. So when I went to get some official paper seen by him, I mentioned it, and he was very intrigued. He said, "How do you know this part about my life?" So I said, "Sir, I have an interest and I also speak Telugu." So that was the beginning of a little conversation. And then, of course, later I got to again interact with him when I was in the IDSA. I was the deputy director. He was a former president of the institute by then. But he used to read all our notes and minutes very carefully, particularly on the nuclear issue. So I had a limited kind of interaction with him. And as I said, he was a very, very impressive intellectual person.
That is a delightful story, sir. Now, moving on to the second question. So we know a lot about the economic policies pursued by former PM P.V. Narasimha Rao. Could you tell us a little about his foreign policy and a little about his security policy?
Well, I'll tell you, Akshat, I would say that this is all the kind of assessment and the wisdom that comes in hindsight. When Mr. Rao was Prime Minister, I don't think any of us, definitely not me, was able to appreciate the enormity of what he was doing. Now, in hindsight, after he had demitted office as Prime Minister and I was spending more time as an analyst, here was a Prime Minister who dealt with India's most serious financial crisis. When we had no reserves and we had to physically lift gold, the rupee was sinking. He was able to negotiate a certain credibility with the international donors, and particularly, I think, his ability to prevail upon Japan to provide certain critical support for a few months and steer India out of literally falling off the cliff as far as the financial situation was concerned. And concurrently, the Soviet Union had collapsed. And India was also groping in this new strategic environment. And he was able to, I think, rewire India's relationship with Washington, India's ties with Moscow, which was in a considerable state of disarray, and also embark upon the Look East policy, which was very important. And look at it, he also was able to literally rewrite the relationship with Israel. If you remember, India did not have a formal relationship at the ambassador level with Israel prior to Prime Minister Rao. All of this he did while he was dealing with an internal security challenge. And here was a man who was leading a minority government, meaning that at any time, a single vote of no confidence that went against him could have brought his government went down. But he steered this very deftly and with no kind of claiming any success. This I think was the most amazing thing about him, that he was a man who didn't talk, but he just walked the talk and did it in a very silent. And sometimes people used to say that, he was always scowling. But the fact is that he delivered and ensured that India did not fall off the cliff. Akshat?
Yes, sir. Sir, could you tell us something about his policy on nuclear matters for the country, especially the nuclear security? There are lots of tales about how he did a lot of work in that field before Prime Minister Vajpayee took over. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Well, first of all, I would say that he was one of the prime ministers who husbanded the Indian nuclear program very carefully at a very critical time. This merits repetition, and Prime Minister Vajpayee had said this himself, that while he was the prime minister when the bomb was exploded, the Indian nuclear program starts with Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, and successive prime ministers, as I said, had husbanded it, looked after it, nurtured it in their own way. And Prime Minister Rao's contribution, I would say, was critical because it came about after the end of the Cold War. Enormous pressure by the Americans on India in the Bill Clinton years to sign either the NPT or the CTBT, FMCT, all kinds of means of being adopted to bring India into the non-nuclear fold. He resisted that. Then he had a balance of payment crisis on his hands, when the economic liberalization program was still very, very nascent and tentative. And as Prime Minister Vajpayee had noted later, Prime Minister Rao kept everything in control. And later, I remember after he demitted office, people would ask him about the nuclear issue. He said only one person needed to know when I laid down office, and that was Prime Minister Vajpayee. And I conveyed to him what I needed. The rest of it is all here. And he patted his stomach. And he never spoke about it to the best of my knowledge. So he was discreet. He claimed no particular, shall we say, success in this whole program. And he was able to understand, I think, the strategic import of India acquiring a nuclear weapon. And as you may be aware, he actually was even. He had given a green signal to do the test in December of 1995, if I remember right. And the Americans, got to know about it and prevailed upon him not to test. But he ensured that the program was saved and kept alive so that Prime Minister Vajpayee could do what he did in May 1998. So his contribution, I would say, is very distinctive in India's nuclear profile.
That is a tremendous feat, sir. So we began this interview by saying that Prime Minister Narasimha Rao had a very complicated legacy. And he was such a complicated man that he garnered enormous awe and enormous criticism from both sides of the aisle, a fact that you briefly mentioned in the article that you recently wrote for the South Asia Monitor. So could you tell us a little about that?
Well, all I would say is that everyone talks about Prime Minister Rao as being the architect of liberalization, economic liberalization, ably complemented by his finance minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh. But the reality is that before he became Prime Minister, Mr. Narasimha Rao was seen as a socialist. I mean, he was a person who actually was not in favor of economic liberalization and the kind of trend of globalization. But to his credit, when he became Prime Minister and his advisors told him about the enormity of the crisis the country was facing, he took perhaps the most radical decision in a very short time frame, as they say, literally over 2 days, and gave the green signal for Dr. Manmohan Singh to go ahead with the program. The Indian rupee was devalued and all of that. And this, as I said, he himself had become a recent convert. Within his party, there were detractors, and across the aisle in the opposition, particularly from the those political parties that were left of center, had completely different views about globalization and the private sector. He was able to carry all of them because he did it in a very quiet and in a persuasive manner, and he ensured that there was no turbulence. And I think while people say it was by stealth, if you read his speeches, when he spoke in Parliament about this, they are very terse, but they have a lot of meaning in them. And Dr. Manmohan Singh and the Reserve Bank of India moved very quickly, and it was done. India had really reversed many of the economic policies that we associated with Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister, and Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. And here was a Prime Minister, an individual not committed to economic liberalization. He wasn't when he was Chief Minister of Andhra. But as Prime Minister, he gave the green signal. So I thought that was remarkable, frankly, and nice.
So that is certainly a tremendous feat. This brings us to the end of 10 minutes. Thank you for being here with us, Commodore Bhaskar, and it was lovely having you. We hope to see you soon again. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshay.